All right, folks, welcome to Investing for Beginners podcast. Today we have episode 363. Andrew and I today are going to talk about how to start learning to invest. So, this is something we haven't talked about in a while, and we thought this might be kind of a fun conversation. So, Andrew, why don't you start us off and give us your best advice on how to start investing? And you need to give us something that everybody can do right now. No pressure.
Okay. Well, pull up the annual report for JP Morgan and just dive in.
And let's put them all to sleep.
Yeah, right. Well, there's two parts to this, right? You have the actual practical side of like literally I just need to open an account in a brokerage, and that is a hurdle you have to get over when you start. And then the complete other side is like, oh man, what can of worms have I opened here? There are a million things to worry about with investing, and what do I focus on? So, I mean, we could spend a little bit of time on the blocking and tackling, if you will. But to me, the hard part when you're first starting out is, okay, everybody's telling me something different. Everybody's talking about something different. How do I prioritize it? Mm-hmm. That to me is the question that needs to be answered when you're first starting out.
Yep, I agree. So let's move past the blocking and tackling and let's talk about that question. So if somebody asked you that, like if your brother asked you that, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I mean, obviously listen to the podcast. That's step number 0. That's tough because you do want to determine what's the best way that you learn personally. And I mean, the luxury of it now is in this day and age, you really have your choice of how you want to do things. I mean, when we first started, there was not nearly as many options. And so there's only a few paths to choose from. These days, you can really pick the way you want to go. And so what I would say, first off, is I would understand that it's not as simple as I'm going to sit you down for 2 minutes and tell you what to do, and you're going to be good for the rest of your life. Because we wish it was that simple and that easy. But the fact of the matter is investing is an emotional thing. It is a very long-term thing. And so I'll ask people in the audience, raise your hand if you've ever done something crazy or emotional in the last 12 months. And then if your hand's not raised, what about in the last 10, 20 years? And if your hand's still not raised, okay, well, you're going to be investing for 40, 50 years. And so the chances of you making an irrational, emotional, money-losing decision are pretty high. And so because those can be really destructive if you only have one nest egg, it's going to take more than 30 seconds or 2 minutes to really ingrain yourself into the right behaviors to become a good investor. And so that's why I know it's so frustrating that you come into investing, you just want the easy button, but it's harder than that. And so you're going to have to choose, am I going to trust a financial advisor and do what he says or what she says and not understand it myself, so I'm fully putting my trust in this person? Or am I going to empower myself a little bit so I can be comfortable with what's going on? Because the reality of investing is there are very emotional periods. We saw in 2020, we saw it in the dot-com bubble, we saw it in the real estate crash. These times where it'll feel like it's too late to learn this stuff. And you might make a decision that honestly will be devastating to your finances. And so to take the time and figure out, okay, how do I want to learn this and make it fun? Do I want to watch videos? Do I want to listen to podcasts? Have fun with it. Don't look at it as a chore, and be patient. And I think that will get you a long way.
Oh yeah, totally agree. And I wish that I feel like I'm more of a visual learner. It's kind of weird. I'm a musician, so you'd think I'd be more of an auditory learner, but I like to read and I like to look at things. And so if I had the depth and breadth of YouTube videos available that are now today, when I first started, oh, that would have been a godsend. I love to read and I still love to read. And that's the majority of how I learn what I learn. But I will admit, a guilty pleasure is to go to YouTube and say, okay, how do I do this? And then it pulls it all up and, some very smart person explains it to me in 6 minutes instead of me having to spend, 3 books and, 200 hours of thinking and writing about it to figure it out. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not a lot. And so those things can be super helpful. And to your point, Andrew, there's so many choices now to make it fun. It could be a little overwhelming too, but I think once you start to get down the path of how do I want to learn this, and what do I think is interesting, and follow your curiosity. That's basically what I've done my whole life, is follow my curiosity, and that led me to investing and to what we're doing now. And I find it endlessly fascinating, and so there's always something new to learn. And I think if you approach it with that mindset, then you're gonna continue to get better and improve as an investor. If you look at it like this is a chore that I have to just do to get it over with, then I would strongly encourage you to go buy ETFs and call it a day. If you don't want to continually learn and you find this a chore, then I would strongly encourage you to do that. If you don't, if this sounds exciting, we just talked about Alibaba in our previous episode. If learning about a company you know nothing about and how they do their thing and analyzing them, and it's a mystery, it's a puzzle. And if you look at it like that, I think it's a lot more intriguing and a lot more interesting to do it. And that's kind of how I try to approach everything.
Is there a filtering process as you follow the curiosity? How do you decide between good sources of information and bad sources of information or advice when there are plenty of people who are willing to give an opinion on things?
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. You go on FinTwit and everybody's, whatever the, drama of the day, everybody's a, expert of that particular drama of the day,
Right.
whether it's oil futures or something, political or some sort of war in the world, everybody becomes an expert overnight. Yeah. So that could be hard. I think the way that I did it, whether or not this is the best way to do it or not, is I did a few things. Number one is I went to Google and I just asked, who are the 10 best people to follow on investing on the internet, or who are the 10 best blog writers, or back in the day, what are the 10 best investing podcasts? And then I would listen to them and see which ones resonated with me. And then as you find resources that you trust, they will probably lead you to other people that you can trust. And that's one of the beauties of social media in today's world, is that you can find, if you find one or two people that you really like, connect with, trust, whatever, then they're going to have people that they recommend and trust and like, and you can just kind of follow the tree that way. Frankly, that's how I did it, albeit not as easily as it's possible to today, but I still did the same thing. I found podcasts, I found blogs, later I found YouTube shows. So I found all kinds of different resources that could help me get better. And that's what I did. What about you?
The same thing. I took kind of a two-sided approach. I read different books, and then I also listened to a lot of investing shows. And in the same way that social media is like that today, and you could argue podcasting is like that still too, but podcasting was definitely like that back then. And, this is kind of obvious, but when you have people who are in community and their peers and they're all experts and they're going to agree on basic principles enough where they're probably not going to associate, somebody who's buying and holding for the long term like we do, it's not going to associate with somebody who's trying to get rich tomorrow, and that person's just never even going to be in that sphere. So you can get a good diversity of ideas, but that are still centered on similar principles, whether that's made explicit or it's implicit. And that's just another kind of confirming piece of evidence. It's a good way to go about things, just like from an analytical perspective. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. And you pick up things as you're observing other things. So for example, if you're listening to podcasts and you find two or three that you really like, hopefully one of them is ours, and we talk about a book, and then you notice that the other two podcasts talk about the same book. Let's say, for example, William Green's book, Richer, Wiser, Happier. If we talk about it, and then the Motley Fool talks about it, and then the Investors Podcast talks about it, that probably should go on your radar as a book you want to check out. Because if a lot of people that you like and follow and respect are talking about similar things, that can be a clue to you that, hey, this is not just something I should just do if I want to, but this is actually a beneficial resource because all these people are talking about it. And that can be a great way to start to kind of build your repertoire. We've mentioned this before in the past, that knowledge compounds. So you don't have to learn everything overnight, and you won't. But the flip side of that is that every time you learn something new, that just builds on something new on top of that. And so the more that you start to kind of uncover all this, the better you're going to become at doing it. And you'll also pick up on the jargon, and you'll also start to pick up on the different maybe metrics, or excuse me, different things about analyzing companies that you may not have thought of, but another smart person has thought of. And you can just take that idea and, incorporate it into what you want to do. Manish Pabrai, one of my favorite investors, I remember early on, he was talking about checklists, and he borrowed a big chunk of his first checklist from Charlie Munger. But then as he grew as an investor, he started adding things, particularly when he made mistakes, when he missed things. And then when those things came back to bite him in the butt, he made sure to put that in the checklist so that thing never caught him off guard again. And that's the other thing about investing that I think you always, kind of going back to the psychological part of it, is expectations. We're not going to be Warren Buffett. And that could be a good thing too. And you have to remember that even as great as he is, he still has mistakes, and you will too. And we all will. And we have to learn from them. It's all kind of part of the evolution of becoming the best investor you can be.
It is. And those are all wise things that can save you from a lot of wasted time if you pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm, for sure. One of the things that when you first start anything new, it's really easy to accumulate a lot of stuff, and then as you do it, you'll start to, I guess, thin the herd a little bit. Like, okay, these are the sources I should follow, or I should listen to, or look at, and the other stuff you can kind of exclude. Doesn't mean that those other things are bad, or maybe that they should be ignored, and maybe that you're not ready for it. This is something you're just not ready for. And I'll give you an example. When I first really started getting into this, I was at work one day and I was really, really bored. And so I downloaded a Michael Mauboussin paper on moats, and 72 pages. And I started reading the PDF on my work computer, which I shouldn't have been doing. I don't recommend that, but it went over my head. I didn't get it. I just, I'd been investing for a year. Michael is a very good writer and a very good teacher, but something like that was a more advanced topic that than I was ready for. And I remember, reading all the words, but not understanding most of them. And then kind of putting it away and thinking, okay, I'm just not smart enough. And then a few years later, I came back to the same paper and I was like, oh, I get this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd had that time to accumulate more knowledge and understand the basis of what it was that he was talking about. And then I was able to fully understand it a lot better. I go back and re-listen to Professor Damodaran's video lectures all the time, because there's always something new that I pick up, or he talks about something I don't quite get. And then when I am in a better place, then you can come back and get it. So I think that's something that you'll naturally learn as you start to accumulate resources.
It was the same for me with DCFs. I mean, that just felt like alchemy, and it still does feel that way, by the way. But yeah, it's just all this gobbledygook of numbers. And I remember reading a book and knowing enough to be super dangerous, but not really mastering it, but tricking myself into thinking that I did. Luckily, I didn't start valuing companies like crazy like it, but I did write something that I cringe at now when I pull that up in my Google Drive to just reinforce the point that, yeah, you can come across something, not completely understand it, not understand any of it, and knowledge does compound. And so there are maybe just a few missing pieces that are in there that are holding you back, that if you come back in 6 months or a year, you're going to figure it out. So I think there's a lot of power in being okay with, I'm not going to understand this fully, but I'm still going to take action on it. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about endless complexity about investing, businesses, the best stocks, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's how much money are you putting in and how long are you letting it compound? And those are really the two biggest inputs that matter. And so if you can get enough confidence to understand, I'm not jumping over a cliff here. Maybe this is more like a a 5-foot bar I'm jumping down, and then you put enough money where you can start that snowball, that compounding snowball, and get it rolling, and then understand that over time you can enhance and optimize and make everything beautiful and perfect like we all want it to be. But it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. And so don't let that paralyze you into overthinking things or just not wanting to take action because you're scared.
Mm.
And that's not always intuitive, but it can be something you can overcome.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's something you can overcome.
So you mentioned immersion. And I know when I first started, I think this more applied to like entrepreneurship for me, but something that never clicked in my head until someone said it out loud on a podcast is like, if you can immerse yourself in the conversation, even if you don't understand all the jargon, even if you don't understand half of what's being said, just the simple immersion over time will help you to eventually get it. So can you talk on that? Because I know you mentioned that, how when you first started, that was something you tried to do and something you do with a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure. That has been I wouldn't call it a superpower, but it's something that I have embraced since I was young, whether it was music, playing the guitar, whether it was wine, that was a lot of fun, or whether it was, investing, is just kind of diving in and really kind of immersing yourself, trying to learn a language. I've spent 4 years on Duolingo and I can talk. I just read, a couple paragraphs from a blog post that my fiance showed me, and I could actually read it. So I mean, it does work. To be able to speak it is a whole other level I'm not quite yet at. But anyway, my point is that the best way to really to learn something is to immerse yourself in it. To Andrew's point, even if you don't understand it, start gathering. So this kind of reminds me of Paul Graham, who's one of the probably premier writers in the US. He wrote this great blog post about how to learn things, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase what he kind of talked about in the memo. Basically, he talked about you got to go through a period of gathering as much stuff as you can about that particular subject, whatever it may be, whether it's cloud computing or whether it's a language or whether it's investing. Get as many resources as you can: books, blog posts, tweets, podcasts, YouTube videos. We have 490 episodes, by the way, of Investing for Beginners podcast. So there's probably a 1 or 2 there for you could probably start with. But anyway, so gather all these resources. And next, you got to start working through the resources. And while you're working through the resources, you have to basically immerse yourself in those resources. And so you have to spend time in the investing world to start to understand it. It's like anything else you learn. It's like learning a language, whether it's wine, whether it's cloud computing, or whether it's investing. You have to spend time in it and start to understand the lingo, start to understand the language, how it's all put together, and thinking about it. It's not just having your eyes go over the words. It's actually thinking about how they interconnect and how they connect with everything. And so once you're in that immersion part of it, then the next step is to start doing output. And his recommendation was to write. There's lots of different ways in today's world that you can output this. And the reason why he suggested that is because that's when you start making connections, is when you actually have to take it and use it. When you learn a skill, I remember when I was playing sports, our baseball coach would always teach us something and then have us go teach other players. And that was the best way for us to learn it, because you can't teach it if you don't know it. And so by putting it into action, it reinforces the muscle skill and go, oh, I get this. And it's the same thing with investing. So if you can, it doesn't have to be for public consumption. I'm not saying you got to be the next great content creator or write the next great investing book, but just by the physical act of you creating a video or doing a podcast or just recording a voice recording or writing in a journal, all those things will help you start to make connections from the things that you're learning. I read about this from Warren Buffett and I read this from Michael Mauboussin, and they're the same thing, but they're said differently. How can I put that together? And when you start to do all those things, that's when you're going to really start to see an explosion in your ability to understand what it is you're reading and what's going on in the investing world, because now you're starting to put it to use. It's one thing to gather knowledge, it's another thing to actually start doing it. When you start doing it and putting things in action is really when our growth and our learning really kind of explodes. I'm sure there's psychological reasons why that is. I don't know what they are, frankly, but that is, if you can really kind of immerse yourself and then start putting it into action, you'll be shocked at how fast you learn stuff.
What about bring a friend with you?
And bring a friend. Yes. That's one of the best ways. I mean, I don't think I would have grown as fast if I didn't have you to help me along the way.
Yeah. Well, if you don't feel like you're a writer, or you don't want to record your voice, I don't blame you. Or, don't want to journal, what's wrong with a text, right?
Nothing.
If you can find someone who's like decently interested like you are, and you guys could teach each other as you go along, that could be very, very fulfilling.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And again, going back to the whole social media thing, yeah, Twitter can be a cesspool, but if you can find the right people in the right places, then you can spend some time making friends online, and you can do it that way. And that's just as easy a way to do it. I know sometimes investing may be a secret sauce that not a lot of other people in your orbit really care to learn about, but there are a lot of people online that are interested in the same things you are. It doesn't have to be Twitter. Reddit is a great resource as well. Facebook, Instagram, just kind of wherever you want to go. That's, I think that's a great way to do it too. All right. So I guess to kind of wrap this all up, maybe we can give people some resources or places we would suggest they go to kind of start this journey. And so here's a few things I would throw out there for you to start with. A couple books, maybe a couple other resources. So the first book I would throw out there would be Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That's a great place for you to really kind of get your mindset right about money and how to think about money. And Morgan's a great writer, and he explains the concepts very, very well. Another resource I would want you to start with would be Warren Buffett's shareholder letters. Those, I think, are a fantastic place for people to really start into investing. And it's you can go to berkshirehathaway.com, and you can download all of his shareholder letters. And the third place I would go would be, this is a little more, I guess, unconventional, is start analyzing a company right away. So open a 10K and start reading a 10K. Pick a company. It could be anything you want. It could be Airbnb. It doesn't have to be, the next great investment. Just a company you're familiar with the name of, and start reading a 10K and making questions, because you're going to have a lot. And there's going to be things you don't understand, and you can just, work through it like you eat a pizza. Just do it piece by piece. Start with the business model, look at the management discussion, look at maybe the risks, some of those kinds of things, and see how much you understand or don't understand, and then start making questions, because that can be the place you can go to start learning about how these companies work. So those would be the three things I would suggest people start with. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a bookworm. I love reading. I've loved reading for not super long, but it's been a good ride. So this is for people who are like, for a fact, you don't want to do the whole stock picking thing, but I would highly, highly caution you. That's why this book's read, to still learn enough so that you're not panicking and freaking out at the next bear market, the next crash, because there's always going to be one. So this one's called The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. John Bogle talks about why indexing is great, and why, just everything that you'll need to know is probably in this book, and that'll set you up for life. But I'm sorry, you do have to take the time. You do have to read or go hire a financial advisor. And that would be the other option. But all the resources Dave mentioned, if you're maybe interested in stock picking, yeah, go do those things, because that can be a lot of fun, and you'll learn a ton.
Yes, for sure. I would, a couple of things I guess I would throw on there too is go to YouTube and find some sort of accounting class. Accounting is the language of business. And having at least a fundamental understanding of how accounting works will go a long, long ways for you to understand financial statements. And so I know our friend Brian Feraldi has classes online, but there's also lots of great resources on YouTube as well. So those would be some good choices. And then the last place I would do is listen to our podcast. Like I said, not kind of jokingly, but in tongue in cheek a little bit, but we do have 490 episodes, and we've done lots of back to the basics series off and on through the years. And there's lots of great resources you can find in our show that can be very helpful, especially for newer beginners.
Well, I'll one up you on that because now we're on YouTube. And so if you were curious how red the book was that I was holding up on camera, now you can see it on YouTube.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, if you do consume your podcast via YouTube, yeah, we're on there now too, and as well as a lot of other great learning resources as well. So it's all great stuff, and it all goes to the knowledge, bucket.
Yeah, finally. How long has it been?
Too long.
My bad.
All right, folks. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up our show today on how to start investing. We hope you enjoyed our show. And if you guys have any questions, anything that you would like us to answer on the air, please reach out to us at newsletter@einvestingforbeginners.com. You can also send us questions on Spotify. See, I keep getting that right. That's kind of amazing. And then you can also send us to us via Twitter. Andrew and I are both on the Twitter machine or X machine as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign us off. You guys go out there and invest with the margin of safety. Emphasis on the safety. Have a great week, and we'll talk to y'all next week.